afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second in the Aged Care Reform Explained webinar series. I'm Patricia Sparrow and I'm joined by my co-host today, Samantha Edmonds from the Older Persons Advocacy Network. Some of you may have sat in on our first one, and hopefully today will also be full of useful information for you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting today. We're in the lands of the Gadigal people in Sydney, and many of you are around the country. I'd like to pay respects to elders past and present, to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, as well as to acknowledge it always was and it always will be Aboriginal land. We're really pleased to do this because we get lots of questions all the time saying we know from the response to the webinar last time and the questions that have come in, we're getting a lot. And I think you're going to take us through.
And today is the second of the three webinars that we're doing, with one more to come on the 30th of June. And Craig will be joining us at that time. And he'll be, well and truly be able to take over my spot, I'm sure.
With you.
So we appreciate the support from the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing in being able to deliver these sessions. And it's really important that these sessions are focused on providing accurate information. We're not the government and we're not here to justify government decisions. In fact, some of those decisions we speak up and argue against, like we have, sorry, I'm having one of those afternoons where my language is leaving me, like we have for the past 6 months on showering, and will continue to do so on IAT.
Actually, I would say it's been longer than 6 months that we've been pointing out that personal care is actually clinical care. There's some housekeeping we need to do to start. Sorry, we're just getting ourselves set off here. We've got some housekeeping today. So a few people were asking about closed captions. You're actually in control of closed captions yourself. If you're on your computer, have a look at your Zoom bar at the bottom. You should see a button that says CC. And if it's not there, you just click on that. If it's not there, you can click on the little button next to it that should have 3 dots. And that will say something like show closed captions, and then you'll be able to click on that. Sam, can you take us through today's agenda, please?
I can indeed. So today we've got 2 hours and we'll be focused on answering the questions that you have. And based on the questions that you've already submitted during the registration process, we've pulled out the top 4 themes, and that's how we'll structure today's discussion. Each theme has around 15 to 20 minutes before we move on to the next one. And then at the end, we'll have time for some open discussion for questions that didn't get caught up in those themes. We'll also provide some information about important aged care reform announcements, particularly following the budget and other papers that have been released over the last few weeks. So today's themes include recent aged care reform announcements, as I said, costs, fees and pricing, access and eligibility, assessment and reassessment, service access and availability, and then, as I said, we'll have some open topics, a wrap up and then a conclusion. So there are 3 ways you can participate today. Around 10% of you have already participated when you submitted one of the 135 questions as part of your registration process. And it's those questions and those results that we've used to create today's topics. As we know, they're the ones you want to talk about. The second way you can participate is by putting a question in the chat. Sasha, Anne, Dee, David and Corey from the COTA and OPAN teams are here in the chat, and that may answer your question directly, or they'll feed it through to Patricia and myself to answer live. We won't be able to get to all your questions today, but please do keep asking them, as we'll use these questions along with others that come through to help shape the final webinar that we're holding on the 30th of June. And of course, we keep all that information. So just look for the chat button down the bottom of the screen that looks like 2 speech bubbles. Patricia.
Okay. So we've covered that. We're going to, if you are going to ask a question live, now one of the things we do want to say about this today, because we think there was some frustration last time. So we just want to be really clear about what we're going to do today. We're going to actually take the questions from the chat first, to try and get through as many of those as we can, and then we'll come to you if you've put your hand up. So it might take a bit of time to get to you, and you can, you know, if you really want to make sure your question's in there, please just put it in the chat. But if you do want to raise your hand, you'll see it's the raise hand button. on your computer. And if you're on your phone, you press *9 to raise your hand. If we do come to you to ask a question directly, you'll be asked to unmute. And I've just seen some notes going on there about unmuting, but you'll be asked to unmute to ask your question. And you'll just need to click the microphone to make sure your audio's on so we can hear you. And you will see a line through the microphone that indicates when you're muted, and it disappears when you're unmuted. If you're on the phone, you need to press *6 to unmute yourself. And then please remember to mute yourself again when you've asked the question. You may find that we mute you. We're not being rude. We're just trying to make sure that the webinar flows smoothly. And if you can, once you've actually asked your question, if you can lower your hand, you just click back on the button and it will lower the hand for you. Today, what we really want to do is just a reminder, this is really about a webinar for older people themselves, for their families, for their friends and carers to ask questions. It's not designed for aged care providers or workers or any of the navigator or care finders. We know some professionals have registered to be on, and we welcome you, but we just ask you to listen really respectfully and leave it to be a time for older people to ask questions, both in the chat and through raising their hands. So if we can do that, that would be really, really good. Okay, that's all the housekeeping we've had, so let's get into it. And we're going to start with some recent government announcements. And since the last time we saw some of you who joined last time, there's been a federal budget, and there was quite a few things in the federal budget that we can just touch on now so you can see the latest that's happening. So they did announce 32,000 new support at home packages in 26-27, which is really important. And will help, and we'll talk a little bit about a report that's out today, a waitlist report, but I'll go through the rest of these things first and then come back to that new report. As you know, and I think we were able to talk about it last time, personal care, that's things like showering and dressing and continence, had in the past been classified not as clinical care. They'd been classified as independent services, which meant that people had to pay a co-contribution. The government's corrected that. And the budget reaffirmed that now for showering, dressing and continence it'd be fully funded by the government, and you don't have to make a co-contribution. They announced some refinements to the assessment process and hardship applications, which are good and welcome. And one of the good things I think that was in the budget was that the end of life pathway, which is sitting at 12 weeks, was increased. So the length of time that someone can get support on the end of life pathway has been increased. In addition, there's 606.5 million over 4 years, and that's to try and get more residential aged care places on the ground, because we know people now are often having to wait quite a long time for residential aged care. So one of the things that we're watching, you will know that there's a report, an aged care accommodation pricing review, and they've put money aside to respond to that. One of the things that COTA Australia and OPAN have been talking about as we've had conversations about this is that we need to make sure in the new system and in whatever they do that there are not ways for providers to not take someone who's perhaps a full pensioner and can't pay a large refundable accommodation deposit. One of the things that we've talked about is like having a minimum number of people that need to be taken by any aged care provider as part of their social contract and using taxpayer funding. We don't know if that's what's going to happen, but that's the sort of thing we're trying to do to make sure that people are protected and can get residential care when they need it, regardless of what their income might be or regardless of what they can afford to pay for a refundable accommodation deposit. The other good thing to see was there's some expanded funding for dementia care, and this includes things like hospital to aged care and having additional dementia care, specialist dementia care program units, and more funding for the National Centre for Monitoring Dementia. So these are really good things, as well as some increased resources for grants for respite, which, you know, we know carers really need that support. We also saw some investments of the 565 million over the 4 years to actually strengthen aged care regulation, governance and quality. That's really important too, and you will have seen, and I know we'll get into it later, but you will have seen that we've also been really advocating, and the government have responded to the fact that there's not enough strong consumer protections in the system, and it's the Quality and Safety Commission that will be responsible for making sure that the protections that get put in are upheld by providers. So that's quite important. We do have on our website, if you want to have a look, we've got a summary document of all of the various things that were in there. And of course, more generally, there were things around capital gains tax and negative gearing and private health insurance. So we tried to cover the ground there. And if you're interested in having a look, please feel free to hop on to our website and do that. But I did want to talk a little bit about the new report for wait lists. So there was one that got released on the day of the budget. And then one came out today. So the one today is probably the one that I'm going to focus on the most, to just give you a few key things about it. Because today's report gives us data right up until the 31st of March. And it's showing that there are about 100,000 people who have been approved and are waiting still to receive support. But what it also shows us is that the average wait times have reduced. Now they're averages, so that means some people will wait longer and some people will get them more quickly. They have split the wait times into priority rankings, and you can see on the table around the wait. So if you're an urgent priority, it would now seem people are getting services within a month. If you're a high priority, it's 1 to 2 months. Medium priority, you're going to get something in 6 to 7 months on average. And then if you're just a person like all of us, it will be 7 to 8 months that you're waiting. Now this is better. It's been an average of 12 months that people are waiting, so it is coming down. However, hasten to add, it's still not good enough that when you put your hand up and you actually need help, you have to wait to be assessed, then you have to wait to get the help. So we know now too that there are about 48,000 people in the system who are waiting for that report from their triage assessment. That's the assessment that you get when you first come into the system, while they work out what sort of support or what sort of priority you are. So there is some encouragement in here to see that wait times are coming down on average. But COTA Australia's position, and I know OPAN would agree that it's too long for people to be waiting, and we think nobody should be waiting for more than a month. So that's something that we'll continue to watch. There's a lot of information on that slide, on the 2 slides. I haven't covered it all. You'll be able to pick that up. If you've registered, you'll get that. The other thing to say is the data doesn't include the Commonwealth Home Support Program, which we know is difficult for people. You often get a CHSP code and then can't find a service provider. So there's not really anything in there yet that helps with that. We also know that you all are aware of, I'm just going to call them the 60% packages, but you sometimes get an allocation of a minimum service offer, I think is the official term. There's not a lot of information in the report yet about how many people have got those and how long you have to wait before you get the full amount. So have a look at those slides. You can interrogate that in a bit more detail. And you'll be up to date with that. And obviously it's a thing we're going to continue to advocate about. We want you to get services much more quickly. I touched on price caps, Sam. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what's happened with there since we all last met?
Absolutely. So as people might remember, is the Australian government has made a commitment to strengthening consumer protections. So COTA and OPAN, along with other sector bodies, have been invited onto a working group. And the focus of that group is about establishing a more robust definition of reasonable pricing, giving providers and consumers clearer guidance on their responsibilities and rights. I think there will be a robust discussion.
There certainly will.
There will also be further consultation on the multi-provider model and developing further guidance and support for older people who self-manage their packages.
And I did see a little thing come up in the chat about the financial reports for self-management. Thanks for raising that. We'll make sure that we talk about that too.
Yeah, great. So obviously we welcome those protections and changes, but of course more work is needed, and we need to get it right because price caps should be implemented, but not rushed, and protections do need to be enforced. The Commission will be able to order refunds for services where providers are found to be overcharging.
Which is good.
Which is great. And then they can also take regulatory action against providers who are choosing not to meet their clear requirement to issue monthly statements, and regular public reporting on investigation and enforcement actions. So a bit more transparency, which will be really important. Yeah. There will also be a new quarterly national summary of supported home prices that will be published, so you can have a sort of a look and see what's going on across Australia, across the sector. And the department will specifically monitor the prices of personal care as they transition into the clinical care category. So as those co-contributions are removed, just making sure that there's not additional charges added on top of those personal care costs. Providers will be encouraged to limit the frequency of price increases to no more than 2 a year, so that, you know, as an older person, you can sort of budget because you know when those changes are coming through. OPAN's also been funded to expand our financial advocacy, and COTA to provide education and information on consumer protections, including service agreements, aged care rights, and information on how to compare prices.
I just saw, while we're on price caps, I just saw a little question pop up there about what action is the Commission going to be able to take? And I think that's what you were saying, Sam. I think one of the key ones that's been missing when we talk to older people is they can just charge me and there's no action and I can't get a refund. So I think one of the stronger things is going to be that if it's found to be unreasonable, and we've got to do the work to make sure, because I think what we all think of as reasonable might be a little bit different, but you can actually get a refund, which will be a really important addition to the system.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pat. Okay, so now we're going to go into theme 1, which is costs, fees and pricing. We're going to make some introductory remarks and then take 2 of the questions submitted during the registration before opening up to questions from the chat and raised hands. So please don't forget to add your questions into the chat and or raise your hand if you'd like to ask something live. So based on questions we have received so far, it's a significant issue. In April this year, Stuart Brown compared the home care packages with the new support at home prices for 5 key services listed on My Aged Care. They found a 38% average increase in these 5 services based on their analysis of all prices listed in My Aged Care on the 1st of April, comparing June 25 to April 2026. You can see on the screen the lowest and highest hourly rates for these services, along with the median for all services. You can upload the whole report to see the analysis of all the prices if that's something you'd like to do. We recognise that these price increases have had a big impact on older people's access to services, and more work needs to be done to determine what is reasonable. As I said, that's going to be a big discussion. OPAN is informed by many older people that prices have increased by more than 38%, and the co-contribution, or the amount that some people pay out of pocket for the service, is going up. This is largely for support at home, but we've also received reports of co-payments being introduced last year for some CHSP services. And that's in line with government's requirements for all CHSP providers to set their own fees policy. So there are 2 ways that the government are monitoring prices. They have a support at home program assurance project, and this has a published plan for 2025 to 2027, including activities focused on payment integrity and pricing review. This also includes looking at the prices published on the website, the prices in contracts, and the prices charged in monthly statements. There will be a published report of findings in the middle of next year, and then this can be compared with the Stuart Brown data.
And that's really important, isn't it? Because sometimes people say we saw a different price on the website than what we ended up being charged, and it's confusing.
Yeah, and so being able to monitor that and see what's going on is very important. The department also have a fraud reporting line that you can call if you are really concerned about those price hikes. Individuals who think the prices that you've been charged are unreasonable, you can obviously speak to your provider first. Get them to explain what they've done and how they've made that price, because sometimes once you see all the different parts that make up a price, it sort of helps clarify why that price has gone up. You can then contact OPAN for advocacy support. One of our network member advocates can support you in raising those issues. And obviously you can also make a complaint to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission about your prices being unreasonable. The Commission recently published a regulatory bulletin outlining their views on this as well. You may also have noticed that the Minister announced that a working group with OPAN, COTA and Ageing Australia and the Commission will be established, which I've touched on, and that some of those discussions around reasonable pricing will be happening there. So look out for opportunities to be involved in those discussions. So, okay, Pat, that's a short summary of price caps and protections. Why don't we go to our first question?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so Margaret from Queensland asked, my provider increased the hourly rate for gardening and maintenance without notifying me. The higher rate appeared on the last statement before I changed providers. Do I have to pay the increased rate? They did not reply to my emails when I queried this. So basically, supported home providers cannot arbitrarily increase your hourly service rates without informing you. They are legally required to consult with you and obtain your agreement before any changes are made to your pricing or fees. If the rate increase is not clearly stipulated in your signed agreement or exceeds any limits the agreement allows, they may consult you and get you to sign an updated pricing schedule. And no, you generally do not have to pay an increased supported home hourly rate if you are not informed. By law, your provider must clearly communicate price changes and obtain your consent before charging you a higher rate. Providers are not allowed to charge you exit fees for leaving the package either. So if your provider has increased the hourly rate for services without your permission, review your contract, check the client agreement or service agreement you signed to see if there's a clause in there that might allow an existing fee adjustment. So that might be increases tied to CPI or set percentages. And then, as we said before, talk to your provider, ask for a full explanation of why the rates changed, because they are required by law to demonstrate that their pricing is reasonable and based on the actual costs of delivering the service. And then check your budget. Review your monthly statements carefully to see how the hourly rate increase is impacting your allocated budget.
And remember that OPAN's here to help you,
Yep.
and you can ultimately make a complaint if you're really concerned for the Commission to look at. Our next question is actually from Mel, which is about whether, in New South Wales, whether can support at home providers add handling fees of 15 to 25% on top of invoices for the actual services, in addition to the 10% basic withholding fee, 5 to 17.5% co-payment. So no, they can't legally charge hidden or unapproved margins like 15 to 25% on top of third-party service invoices, in addition to the capped 10% care management fee and the co-payments that you might already be paying. Something that we've been starting to take up where we're hearing that this is happening. So if a provider is processing an invoice from an independent contractor, they can sometimes charge an administration or loading fee, but it's typically capped at 10%. So you shouldn't be seeing figures like 15 to 25. A 15 to 25% handling fee is generally considered unreasonable and breaches the government's pricing transparency guidelines. For larger brokered items, specific caps apply. So, for example, if you're getting home modifications, the administration's capped at 15% or $1,500, whichever's lower. So if your provider is charging you costs 15 to 25% rather than just the sort of handling 10%, you can do the same thing. You can review your agreement. You can check the published provider list and compare your prices in the area on the My Aged Care Find a Provider tool. And again, ultimately what you can do is escalate your concerns through OPAN and to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission and get some help. But if you're getting 15 to 25%, take a look. It's probably something you want to stop.
Great. So let's turn to live questions, Pat, and see what's in the chat.
Fantastic. Sorry, just got to play with a button on my computer and then I'll be able to see it.
Okay, so there's a first question asking from Zenny, and my apologies if I've mispronounced your name. When are the price caps going to take place? That is a good question. They have been delayed. I believe it will be at the end of the year in
next year.
I
think they've put it off for 12 months. So I think it's now, was supposed to be 1 July 26. I think they're now talking 1 July 27. And, you know, that's really the work that we're going to be doing over the next period of time to try and get those sorted.
Yes, that's it. Okay, I can see your hands up from Lady Nora Preston.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, I didn't see, we were told at all these meetings that we've attended, personally, that Centrelink are exempt. And I can't see anything there about the Centrelink age pensioners be exempt and also exempt from reassessment, because Centrelink thoroughly do assessments and that's where it ends. So what can you tell us about that? And also I've had a lot of issues as well myself with not getting the assistance that you're all telling us that we can get, but we can't because with this reform, it's actually escalated aged abuse, age discrimination, bullying, etc. It hasn't stopped, it's escalated. So there's a real problem there that has to be fixed with everyone who is supposed to be helping and they're not.
Well, that's not good if that's how you're feeling, and certainly that's the sort of thing that we'll continue to raise. I'm not sure I fully understand the question about Centrelink. I don't think at this stage I think you're saying about our pensioners. Pensioners are still required to make co-contributions.
Just small amounts compared to others,
amounts,
but
yeah.
unless you're talking about hardship applications, so you can actually put in a hardship application to have your fees reduced or co-contributions reduced or completely waived, and that is a process through the Department of Social Services, or as you refer to, Centrelink. There's a process, an online form. They have simplified it. Finally, I'm not sure when that simplified form will be up, but they've certainly made it a lot easier to apply for that hardship. I believe you can ask for a review of your hardship application if it does get pushed back. So there is a process for that through Centrelink, but that will be through Department of Social Services. So that's something we can sort of have a look at and maybe make sure that information's available.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see some other questions about the 60% packages and how long people are waiting. As said, there is no data in the report that's been released today about those packages of 60% and how long people are waiting. We do think there should be a very clear minimum time that people are on them, but at this stage, there's not really much more we can say about that. I think we picked up the...
So there's another question about what is the appeal process if I don't agree with the level of funding after a reassessment. So you can seek a review, and that's by making a written application, but I believe there will be a way to actually do that online. And currently it's handwritten or typed, but you will be able to do that online, and you submit that to the system governor or the department, and they will then have around 90 days to look at that and determine whether or not your appeal is upheld or not. Really important to have as much data as you can in that process. Make sure you've got all the documentation to show to the government. You can then go to the Administrative Review Tribunal, which is a whole other process, and in that's probably like it's quite a step. It looks like it may cost money from what we've seen, but we're not very clear yet on what that process looks like.
Because it's quite complicated and it puts quite a lot back on individuals, and that's one of the things that we're raising too, that there's a lot of expectation about what you have to do. And this is why I think getting the Quality and Safety Commission working more actively is going to be really important. And so I've just realised I actually can't see the chat. Okay. So I'm going to, if I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking over at Sam's to see what the questions there are.
No problems. So Cecilia is next. So has there been any indication from the Minister to address the issue of transport for people living in rural and regional areas? Recipients of packages are charged 600% higher fees by community transport than those on a package. That's significant. We haven't heard anything, I don't think.
No, we haven't. But I think this is where a whole conversation around pricing is going to be really important. Obviously, there's also some decisions still to be made about the Commonwealth Home Support Program, which is generally where transport is being funded from. So there are a few things still not in place there, but that's pretty awful to hear. And transport's so critical for people to get to and from places. It's really critical that that does get addressed.
Yeah, and sorry, that question was from Helen. So it's a huge issue, and I know we've been advocating, and I'm sure COTA's advocating as well. I mean, transport is essential to reach services, so we will keep arguing.
Okay. I'm not sure who's asked the question, but someone's raised about being charged 15 minutes for physio preparation or a visit to assess me, and they didn't actually assess you. They just gave you a photocopy of community care, of community exercise group, and a 230-hour every phone call and email charged. I think you should be raising that with your provider and with the Commission if you need to. they really should have done an assessment, not just given you something that they prepared earlier, regardless of what you might need. So I think that's something you should be raising.
Absolutely. And of course, you can call OPAN if you'd like an advocate to support you in that process as well. Speaking of, so can we please ask COTA and OPAN to advocate on consumers' behalf when the 60% allocation process will be resolved? We're constantly asking when that's going to cease. And for those that are already on that 60% package, when that full funding is going to be made available. I know for some it will be by the 30th of June, but new people are rolling out on that package, and we don't know when that's going to stop.
But please be assured, and I know sometimes progress seems slow, right? So you might think we're not sort of really doing anything, and we did see how long it took to get that change to personal care. So we are doing as much as we can to try and get that shift, and we'll keep you up to date, and hopefully we will see that happen.
I can see we now have a hand up from Sylvie.
Thank you. I've posted this in the chat a couple of times, but what is the situation for people who have been on CSHP and whose situation might have been changed? And what does the new Act say about the CSHP level people, and how long would they be reassessed, et cetera, et cetera?
Good question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think how to best tackle that, because at the moment the CHSP program still exists separately.
Yeah.
And so you would be making a decision, I guess, about whether or not you want to go down the path of getting a package, or if your needs increase and you need a package. Some people are actually telling us they don't want to move off CHSP until the situation is much clearer. So you don't have to. But if you do find that you need more support, then you would go through the same process as anybody else who's been assessed.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you want to add to that, Sam?
No, I agreed. So yeah, you'd go through that whole reassessment process, and that will determine the level of supported home funding. At this point in time, as Pat touched on, CHSP is separate to supported home, with the decision, I believe, not before July 2027, I think was the wording, when we'll have some idea of what's going to happen with CHSP and in terms of its relation to supported home.
And look, I think we're going to have to hear about that sooner rather than later. And I think, government's making some decisions now about how they think the two programs will integrate or not. And so we're all waiting to hear the outcome of that one.
Yeah. Cindy's asking, the transition from home care packages to supported home, what happens with the unspent funds? They go with you, and you are able to spend them as you would have under a home care package.
And there's no time. There's no time that you have to do it by. It's a little bit different if you've come in on the new system, because the amount that you can keep is different. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But if you've transitioned, your funds to spend as and when, in agreement with your provider.
Great. Any more questions? We've got a hand up from Liz.
Just wondering, I was on the home care program. I've gone to supported home. I'm using up my package rapidly, and my provider's talking about maybe top-up fees, and I'm only on a pension. I've applied for hardship and haven't heard anything from Centrelink.
So they're just suggesting they're going to charge you extra.
Yeah.
To give you more. I don't know why we wouldn't be. Are you on a top level package?
No, I'm only on level 2, and I'm trying to get a reassessment to a higher level. I've been on level 2 for 7 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the reassessment's really critical.
Yeah, and if you're waiting on hardship, I know there's been some delays with hardship coming through. So certainly is, keep following up. Again, you can contact OPAN, and an advocate can support you with that in that follow-up with the Department of Social Services to find out where your hardship application is up to.
But they can't charge you additional fees unless you sort of agree. So they sound like they're saying, well, while we're waiting for a reassessment, if you can't afford it and you don't want it, I think you can say no and try and push on where you can to get your reassessment done more quickly.
I'm getting the feeling that I'm going to have to drop services.
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah.
And maybe it would be good to ring OPAN to see if they can get involved and help you a little bit with that.
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of that support, we're trying to get that hardship provision through, because obviously that will help help with that as well. Okay, Cindy.
Yes, my question, I think I put it in the comments, is about the unspent funding at transition to the SAH. I think the home care package still has some surplus. The question is the contribution from the ITF fee payment, and there are some is government funding. I think both of them is the become part of this unspent surplus. But right now, when checking with the provider, they claim the client contribution part is all used up, and all the remaining surplus is all government funding. That surprised me, because I think if that's the case, maybe they process all this service, use client funding first and the government funding as a supplement. And if this is the case, at some stage, if the client exit the program, for example, the client pass, and the remaining funding will be all returned to government, then that means all this time the service is like self-funded by the client first, and then whatever is the gap is supplemented by government funding. I don't think that's the correct way of calculation.
No, I don't think that's the correct way of calculation at all. I think that whatever service you're getting, it should be whatever the government proportion is and whatever your co-payment is. But just on the unspent funds, oh, you mean under the, sorry, just checking, you mean
under the home care package, we have unspent fund, quite a large number, because
so if you had a home care package and you had unspent funds, you keep those funds and you can spend them as you need.
But I think I understand that the unspent fund will still keep it for mom to use. But the thing is, the calculation split between the client portion and government funding part, I think from what I was told by the provider at the transition, they say there's nothing left, it's all used up. I thought, how can you have a surplus and the client part is already all used up? That's what I don't understand, because I haven't get a comparison with how other providers calculate when at the transition.
It does sound like something really, your provider's doing something that's odd that you need to investigate. So I would agree with you, and I think Sam's nodding too. We think the way they're calculating it doesn't sound right at all, and that's something that something to raise. And again, if you need support, let us know. And
that's all I want to know, because otherwise I think we pay out of pocket, like self-funded, and if some stage mom pass away, all the fund refund to government. The government funding pretty much like untouched and is all used up our contribution first. We have nothing to be refunded. That's what I feel surprised.
My understanding is that would be being spent in tandem. So I think that's something you can legitimately take up.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pat. Vivian is next. There
Hello?
we go. Yeah.
Sorry. So I'm an occupational therapist. I'm working with people across both systems. My first statement is that people on pensions cannot afford a co-payment. They're lucky if they've got $5 a week to pay for food and everything else. So I don't understand why pensioners aren't exempted. My next question is about equipment, because my understanding is people on the lower levels are only eligible for $500 of equipment for life, and then it's $2,000, and then it's $15,000, and I'm wondering why those limits are so low, and if there's a difference to that. And then my next question is, you say we were talking about people having the grandfather clause, but then I've got clients that I'm seeing and they're saying that if they don't spend their allocated funds per month, the government is literally, and the providers don't have any control over this, the government is literally taking the money back from them. So I'm just wondering, I just want an answer to all those three questions, please. Thank you.
So Vivian, thanks for joining us. I will just say that we are trying to make sure that older people and their families and friends are getting priority for the questions. So thanks for joining us and for raising those things. But can I just remind people that we really are wanting to let older people ask questions. You raised a number of really good points. We can't tell you exactly why the fees were set, the amounts were set the way they were. That's a decision of government. We can only tell you that's what they are. But did you want to add anything, Sam?
No, I mean, it's something that we both organisations and many other peak bodies have been advocating around for a long time. In terms of pensioners, completely understand, and it's something again that we've been talking about is people on full pension, should they be paying full fee? Well, should they be paying co-contributions? I mean, there's lots of different angles to that, and things that need to be looked at, and certainly recognise that co-contributions can have a pretty significant impact on someone that's on a pension, on a full pension. And then the last one was around, so if you're on support at home, there's probably true to some extent. So support at home, you get a quarterly budget. And if you haven't spent that money by the end of that quarter, you can only take forward $1,000. It's not like the home care package where anything unspent could carry forward with you. Under support at home, you can only take forward $1,000. So you're correct, any money that hasn't been spent does go back to the government.
That's right. And look, I can see lots of comments and questions in the chat. Please be sure we will go through them and we will be picking up the points that are being made. If there's something that we can answer, our team will be doing that now. If there are other things that we can't answer, we've got your comments and questions and we'll take them forward. Thank you. Is it time to maybe be moving on to the next?
Absolutely.
Session?
So Pat, take us through.
Access and eligibility.
Yeah.
Really, it should be easy, shouldn't it, to apply for aged care? But all of you good people who are here who've been through it know that it's anything but straightforward. And we hear regularly from people about the difficulties they're having. Obviously, doing things online can sometimes be okay. You can get what you need, but often sometimes they're really hard to use. We do hear comments about the call centre that's My Aged Care and getting inconsistent information from people, and that, you know, doing a phone screening can sort of feel unhelpful, and that then you sort of do that and you're waiting a long time for the assessment. So we have been, as both organisations, talking around what some of the problems with My Aged Care are. So My Aged Care experience of older people since the implementation of the new Act is generally showing that people are continuing to have system access issues. The phone service is variable, but people tend to say they find the phone better than just using the website because at least there is a real person to talk to. That the time taken from registration through to assessment, and the development of a care plan and the assignment of a place is confusing, frustrating and distressing. I get confused just talking about it. And that it's really compounded because you don't know how long you're going to be waiting at any of those stages. So it is sort of hard and it's eroding people's confidence. We know that people are waiting sort of more than a week for an assessment appointment to even be booked. So you've got that even before you start. And generally, people have told us since 1 November that navigators, care finders and the advocacy service are generally positive, but they're in such high demand that, you know, you can't always get what you need. And one of the things that we are arguing for is that the care finder at the moment is really only for people who are deemed to have really complex circumstances. When we talk to older people, most people say, you know, I don't need to know a lot. I just want an hour of somebody's time to talk through my specific circumstances and get the answer to my questions. And that's something that we are also advocating for. Some of the things that we in our collective organisations have been sort of advocating for to try and improve the situation is that we want a commitment to a goal of 30 days waiting time between the time you register to the time you get services. And at the moment, we heard about the waits now. That's a much longer period of time.
Yeah.
Government's got a target of around 90 days, but we still think it needs to come down to 30. We do want to see what the wait times on My Aged Care are. That's a bit that's not clear for people. And so you sort of go in and sort of seems to happen randomly and things don't, you're not sure what's going to happen when. We need much clearer information on the allocation and use of the My Aged Care codes as part of the registration and assessment booking process. And one of the things we really want to see is real-time availability data. So you will go on and try and find a service, and it looks like there might be a vacancy with a service, and then you ring them up. I need to find out, no, there isn't a vacancy. In some cases, you go on a wait list. In some cases, they just say we're not even keeping a wait list now. So we know that's really frustrating for people. We also know that people like to self-manage, and there's not clear information about that. It's not prominent enough, and it's not clear enough about how you can do it. And we're talking to people all the time who want to do that. Changes we think around need to be implemented around the referral code, because what we do want is for you to be able to go to different providers for different services. One of the things we're hearing all the time, we were talking about technology before, we've been hearing about people being assessed for a piece of equipment. They can see from a local reputable supplier down the road that there's a piece of equipment that they've been assessed for that's there at a set price, but they're having to go through the individual provider, and the individual provider is actually adding cost onto that, and so it makes it more expensive. So we're arguing that you shouldn't have to do that, that we want you to be able to go directly to the supplier. If you've got an assessment, they've got what you need, you should be able to do that, cut out the middleman. So those are some of the things. The call centre, because people have said they like the call centre, we think that needs to be promoted more on the website. I think they're trying to channel people onto the website, so we want people to be able to call. And that's possibly just the way that it's done. It's been a long time since that has had an overhaul, but it should be more obvious. One of the things we've also talked about is, should you be able to book services through My Aged Care phone operator to get a direct assessment booking? Don't know how we'll go with that one. I've already talked about extending navigation services, and also we think it's really important the Services Australia ACSOs, or the aged care services officers, should be in all locations, because people find when they connect with them, they're actually really, really helpful. So that's a little bit of, I suppose, really more about what people are telling us they're experiencing and what sorts of things we're advocating for to try and get some improvements. But I think we're on to questions now. And our first question is, why has access to allied health services under support at home become more difficult? And we are hearing this all the time now.
Absolutely.
All the time. And it seems to be a bit of a combination of things. And it does vary a lot depending on where you're living, about how difficult it is to get them. So it seems that the assessment backlogs and the long waiting times are contributing to delays between initial contact with the system, the clinical assessment, and then the actual commencement of the services. We're also hearing, which is a problem we need to address, that some allied health organisations are saying they're struggling with the new support at home unit pricing, particularly in regional and remote areas, and so they're not so keen to be involved. That's something that we need to get addressed. And we do know, unfortunately, that there's a general shortage of many allied health professionals. And if it's more complex for them to be involved in the system, they're less likely to want to work in aged care. So I think there's more work that needs to be done, because we all know how important allied health is. And we know that they, really are incredible supports for people at home. We think also that the uncertainty regarding the future of the Commonwealth Home Support Program and how it's going to work with support at home is also probably contributing to implementation difficulties. So we think that's what's happening. That doesn't solve the problem, and those are the sorts of issues that we continue to raise. And as we talk to so many people, and well, we all know, don't we, if you have an injury or you need help to sort of be able to move and to do things, that allied health is incredibly important. So that's an issue that's on our radar, and we'll keep raising.
Absolutely. So our second question is from Natalie in Queensland, and she's saying, what do we tell people who say, what's the use of getting My Aged Care approvals if there is no service provider availability? Look, we absolutely recognise that the lack of service availability and waiting times need to be addressed. And as we've said, 30 days should be the maximum from assessment to accessing the service, and people shouldn't be waiting up to a year to access those services. My Aged Care approval demonstrates your eligibility for aged care services, so that then places you on an active list for service response, even though you might have to wait. And it should trigger the aged care system to respond to, at least to provide some interim services before you move to the full suite of services that you may need. So your approval kind of acts as an official data that proves your local area needs more services or more care workers, and that which drives the allocation of future resources and funding. So while it may seem fruitless to do that, it's really important you do, so you're there, you're in the system, and people know that you're waiting for your services.
I think we've got to go to the chat, Sam, and I can't access it, so I don't know if you. Let's see what questions we've got coming through.
Sharon is asking, how do you get a walker to leave hospital with the long ATHM process, so the assistive technology and home modifications process, of an OT prescription and quotes required to submit a support plan review request? Mary is asking, why is $198 OT report needed for an economical tilt kettle?
It's a very good
and look,
question.
says OTs can charge up to $220 for an item under $100.
Yeah, okay. So this is, I mean, what we can say about this is not good enough, and it's not right that you're paying that sort of amount for things that, as you're saying, are quite economical, that you end up being charged with that. So that's an issue that we are taking up. In terms of getting a walker to leave hospital, are there other options that people can hospitals sometimes have equipment?
I think a hospital can do maybe a physio assessment.
I'd be pushing the hospital a little bit to see what they can do to support you. And each state is different, but states have got their own sort of equipment schemes. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure where you're from, Sharon, but I'd be putting some pressure on the hospital and the state system too, while we're going through this process with Support at Home.
Yeah, and there certainly has been a lot of discussion around, you know, when should there be an OT assessment, and when is something that the GP could say, yes, you need this to be able to stay at home and do what you need to do to be able to stay there.
And so it ties in with my earlier comment then about if a GP said you need it, should be accepted, and then you might just be able to go to the supplier and get it without having to go through this rigmarole. So yeah, that's the stuff that we're still working through. And I know that doesn't help you if that's an issue that you're facing right now, which is why I'm saying put some pressure on the hospital and see what the state can do.
Yeah. So I can see a hand up from Margaret.
Thank you. I was just working in the not-for-profit sector, government and not-for-profits have access to state procurement processes often, which can heavily discount. Why have you guys done any work around advocacy on that matter? I mean, I'm just about to look on a tipping kettle to see how much, because people are putting prices in, and I've seen them, I've used them. But why aren't we taking up those offers of volume purchasing through state procurement processes that heavily discounts? I find it ridiculous that it's not happening.
So this is a difficult area around state and Commonwealth. So there have been many conversations like this. Then we can only tell you where government's landed. We've certainly raised around these issues about making sure that people can access things quickly and at a good price. But this is one of the things about living in a Commonwealth state system. It's sort of not quite where it's landed. But thank you. It is a good point. We have raised it. It's not something that they're looking at now, and we'll be trying to work through the system how we get these improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the chat, we've just had a question from Marcolina from Victoria, asking around, are Webster packs available under the Support at Home program? So Support at Home program funding does not directly cover the actual cost of the Webster pack. Providers and workers should help with medication tasks and assist with organising for a pharmacist to prepare a Webster pack. And preparation of Webster packs, so termed dose administration aids, is typically managed under the Australian Government's Community Pharmacy Agreement.
So this is another one of those areas where there's a little bit of boundary around it, but certainly an issue we're aware of, and we've been having some conversations about how to make it easier for people, but that's the situation currently.
Yeah. Chelsea, I can see you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you. So I got two questions. I'm one of the service provider, and I commonly would be asking the question from the customer that they asked us to be their supporter because they say they used to use this way to get assessment, but I think that's a highly conflict of the interest, and I don't know why the government allowed the people to doing that. It sounds like a lot of the customer has been exploited with this kind of the strategy, and I feel a little bit concerned about this situation and would like to get some clarification about the legibility of this kind of process. And I also have a question about what would happen for those people who's on the Commonwealth after July. Are they going to transitioning into the support at home program, or is there any other way to helping them? Because we have a lot of question about what are they going to do after July. They seem quite nervous about transitioning into the support at home.
So no decision's been made yet about CHSP and support at home. The government had said it was not going to happen before 1 July 2027. There hasn't been any kind of announcement yet about what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to look. So we're waiting to see what government's going to do. And we understand that does make people feel really anxious and concerned about what the future is going to look like. But at this stage, there's no clear answers for people other than just saying no decisions have been made, and hopefully that'll be clearer over time. So we completely appreciate that's an inadequate answer, but unfortunately that's the only answer we can give you, because we're sort of waiting for government to make some decisions about that. The other question that you asked around supporting older people, and I'm not 100% sure whether you really meant in terms of the new sort of supporter and decision making. I don't think that's what you meant. I think you're talking about people saying, you know, because they feel so desperate about their wait times, etc. I guess people are going to reach out to whoever. I think it is important that you do refer people to people who can help, but also if someone's really desperate and you can support them, you know, give them some support, make sure they've got information, make sure they know where to go. I think that's a really important thing. And obviously, if you're waiting for a really, really long time, and you're, you know, needing help, it's the Older Persons Advocacy Network. We did cover this last time. The Older Persons Advocacy Network does individual advocacy. So they're the people you come to if you've got a particular issue that you really need help to address. What COTA Australia does is more systemic advocacy. So we pick up the broader issues across the system and advocate to government about that. We work really well together. And you can send us your story about what's happening to you, and we take that into account in the advocacy that we do. But if you actually need someone to go into bat for you or to find out what's happening, you need to contact the Older Persons Advocacy Network. And I think I can see Sue's got her hand up.
Hi, thanks Pat, and thanks Sam. A couple of quick questions. There's been some comment in the chat about osteopathy being under clinical as an allied health service, and wondering if there's been any advocacy about that. And also the second one was people on low incomes and full pensioners who may be paying rent and mortgages, etc. Is there any chance that, you know, there's going to be some advocacy around having a threshold around that?
So certainly we did advocate around those things, around what people are paying when they were being set by government. And I mean, government's landed where it has, and that's the importance of the hardship provisions. And there have been some, you know, reductions in the way that people need to fill out the forms. But we also advocated that the hardship provisions should probably kick in at a different point than they do now. And that's not something that's been picked up by government. We will continue to do that. On what's allowed under clinical care, again, you know, when they were setting up the service lists and classifying, there was lots of conversations to and from about the different types of support and assistance that people can get or not get under it. And at the moment, that's standing, but they are ongoing conversations, and you telling us that that's an issue today is really helpful. And sorry, you'll just note Sam's had to step out because I think we actually need to move on to the next section. So I might just slide over a little bit so that I'm not sort of sitting in the corner. Hopefully you can see me okay, and hopefully Sam will be back soon. But that means we're actually going to move on to assessment and reassessment. And we know the issues people are facing, and we've been, you know, it's come out already through our conversation today. Obviously, one of the things we're all really concerned about is the new integrated assessment tool, or sometimes you might hear it called the IAT, which uses an algorithm-based approach to help determine support classifications and funding levels. We've been really concerned, as I know you have, and I know clinicians are, around assessors not having the ability to override and apply professional judgment in complex cases. That is something that we are all advocating really hard on right now. We've also raised concerns about the automated decision-making powers of the new Act, and I said there should be clinical overrides for that. It's important to know the Commonwealth Ombudsman has actually commenced an investigation into complaints about the fairness and transparency of the IAT process. And we talked earlier today about the additional funding in the budget, which didn't have a lot of detail about what they're going to do, but there is some work going on around the assessment process. So we're hoping that the issue about the algorithm might be part of what they're going to look at. The minister's also sort of said there are adjustments to the allocation waiting periods for people who've been assessed as high priority, and that on average assessment wait times are coming down and consistently coming in at around 1 month. But we know from the figures released today, there are still 48,000 people waiting for an assessment. We also think that we need to look at the priority process, which you saw today, the different categories and that. But what we are seeing is that people living with dementia in metropolitan areas whose carers may be burnt out seem to be only a medium priority, and we don't think that's quite right. So there's quite a lot of work to do in that space. Okay, I think that takes us on to questions. And we've got a question from Kate in Victoria, and Kate wants to know, what do I need to know for an aged care reassessment meeting? And could my reassessment lead to a reduction in support due to the new assessment process? So just generally what we would say is, if you're having a reassessment, you need documents to verify who you are and your medical history, along with notes on how your care needs have changed. And you would think that they would be in the system, but it's always good to have them there and ready there. So documents might include your Medicare card, another form of ID, your driver's license, passport or pension healthcare card. If you're like me and you don't drive, it can be really hard to actually prove who you are sometimes. But your passport or pension healthcare card will help with that if you have those. You might also have medical information, things like recent GP referral letters, or you might have a hospital discharge summary, medication list, or something from your allied health or specialist notes that give them information about your current health condition. And if you've got your current support plan and any correspondence about the services you're already receiving, and if it's relevant, you should have your power of attorney or advanced care directive available as too. And what you want to discuss in that session with them is you want to be able to tell them what's going well for you, what's difficult, and you might have some specific examples of things that you were doing fine and that you're now finding more difficult. And, try and be honest. I know I don't always want to tell people when I'm, having a problem, but this is the time to do it. So don't feel that you should say you're doing better than you are. Be really honest about what you're struggling with, and don't be embarrassed if it does mean that you need extra support. And you might have goals, what you're wanting to achieve with the updated services. So some people, I've had people say when they find it more difficult to walk, they want to be able to get to the letterbox. Or you might have something else that's really important to you about staying safely in your own home, and just remaining active generally. You should be able to sort of just feel free to talk about that. And, contact details, names and numbers of your GP and other healthcare professionals, or anybody who's important to you that you want them to interact with. It shouldn't lead to a reduction in services if care needs. If you've come in, I'm not going to say this properly, but I'm going to have a crack. If you've come in from the old home care package system and you've been allocated one of the new 4 levels of packages, and a reassessment shouldn't result in you losing any services at all. They'll stay at the level that they are. And you just need to, talk this through in terms of, You would only get a reduction if your care needs have decreased. And given that you're actually having a reassessment because you're finding things harder, you wouldn't think your care needs have actually decreased. You might find, though, something to think about is with the way that the financials work, it could actually lead to increased costs if you're finding you need more of some services than others. But at least this decision now that's been made about clinical care means that if you're needing more clinical care, you won't actually have to pay anything out of your own pocket for that. And if you do find that there's some services you need that are requiring more, you should be able to get to potentially to think again about hardship or other sorts of financial support. And Sam, welcome back. Can we give you a question?
So our second question is from Elizabeth in Queensland. She wrote that she would like, how long do reassessments take to go up a level? So the short answer is that the rules say they may take up to from 57 days to 71 days. So not short. We understand it's not easy, and we had to trawl through the rules ourselves and the manuals to build the answer, and it's still not 100% clear. So we think
clearly isn't good enough.
No, that's it. So we really think the department needs to provide clearer communication and information to older people about both formal reassessments and the support plan review process. My Aged Care appears to have tried, but it is still complicated and not transparent, and will continue to follow up. The term reassessment is an umbrella term which is broadly used to describe both support plan reviews and then a reassessment where you're looking for a new approval or an assessment to a higher level of service. And the reassessment is a formal government-appointed clinical evaluation to assess if your needs have changed significantly. And that's absolutely required if you want to change your classification and overall funding tier. So both start with a support plan review, and one outcome may be the assessor deciding you need to have a full reassessment. Support plan review should happen annually, but can also happen ad hoc as your needs change, or something happens. Maybe, you end up having an episode in hospital, so you can certainly look for a support plan review. And sometimes providers can ask on your behalf if they feel you need more support. So how did we get to that time frame of 57 to 71 days? Well, we kind of went 14 to 28 days when you make a request, and then the assessment organisation gets in touch with you to just essentially triage your call. Once they accept that request, they have up to 15 days to finalise the support plan review. An assessor can contact within 3 days if urgent. This is the first step for reassessments because the outcome of a support plan review may be the need, as I said, for a full reassessment. And sometimes they'll decide you need a reassessment on your first call and then maybe another call. So if you need a reassessment, it seems to follow the timeframes of assessments, which are meant to be done within 28 days. And then in-person assessments usually take 2 to 6 weeks after initial contact. So we've added all that time up and gone basically, around 57 to 71 days. And we do absolutely recognise that in some places it's taking much longer for that to happen. And then after the assessment visit, it generally takes up to 8 weeks for your classification and support plan to be approved. And then urgent cases can be approved more quickly. So let's now turn to live questions. Anything in the chat. Is it hard to get higher level care? I have asked for more services as I'm going into hospital and I live by myself and I don't have any family to help me, Irene. So Irene, yes, you would need to obviously apply for a reassessment. And as we noted, there is that potential 57 to 71 days in urgent situations. So you're saying you live by yourself, you don't have any family, so you're going to need supports. So there is that ability to have a more urgent assessment. But if you're looking for a higher level of care, I think there's still that wait time to access that higher level of care, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think we talked last time about assessments. It's really difficult. Sometimes people think, oh, if I go into hospital, I might be able to get an assessment. That doesn't always happen unless the times come to consider residential care. But if you're wanting to go home, they won't do an assessment in hospital either. But again, if you do need help, don't forget that's what OPAN's here for.
Peggy, I can see your hand is up.
Sorry, I'm not really great with Zoom. I've typed the question, but I want to ask, it kind of goes back to a few of the themes you discussed today. So it's regarding my mum. She's in the process at the moment of waiting to be reassessed to a higher level of care, as my aged care advised me to do the process, because all of a sudden with the new supported home, the providers put the fees up and are now not sufficient for the hour of services she requires a week. What my question is, so obviously there's the shortfall now. And mum is a full pensioner, doesn't have any the money to pay from her pocket. Can the provider access the shortfall, be 1,200, whatever it is a month, from her next quarter's budget?
I don't believe so, but Peggy, it's a good question, and I might.
Yeah, I've been asking this, and it's.
What they said to you?
No one knows. I've been on with Open. I've been everywhere, and my aged care all the time. I'm on the phone to them. I understand that they only give the budget quarterly, but the way I see it is the funds are there. She's getting whatever level 4 is. I think it's around 63 or something, 64,000.
Yeah.
Until in the interim, until she gets classified as classification 8, which puts the funding up, the provider should be able to get the funding from.
I get your question.
Get the money from there.
I get your question. I don't think they can, but it might be something that we need to check and come back to you with a little more information about, because I think they do it as the rigid quarter, and you spend the money in that quarter, and that's the way they make sure that you've got money all the way through to, each time. But I understand what you're asking, but I don't think they can, but we'll see if we can find out anything more about that for you and get back to people. Yeah.
Just got another question come in. If you are a carer, can you get support navigating My Aged Care with an aged care navigator?
Well, it depends on whether or not there's nothing specifically for carers, is my understanding. The navigators or the care finders actually are around people who've got really complex care needs. So you'll recall I was saying earlier, we think there needs to be a broader based support system for whether you're an older person or whether you're a carer, just trying to work your way through the maze. But at the moment, I don't think I think if you are caring for someone who's in that complex assessment, you'll probably have contact with a care finder. But there's nothing specifically for a carer, and we just need to push to make sure that there's more help for everybody, just to ask questions and get answers and know what they need to do.
That's right, because we recognise how important the role of carers is in supporting older people. So we've got what looks like probably a final question from Lady Nora Preston.
Yep. Hi. Can you do something about when you do try and contact, say, My Aged Care on any assessments or complaints, there's no email addresses that they give out, and you actually need them in writing, don't you, on what's going on? Can you advocate for them to actually provide email addresses? And there was also compensation that was raised that we were going to be getting if we, when things have gone wrong, and apparently that hasn't been set up either. Can you also advocate to set up the compensation payment to the victims?
Definitely.
We'll put that on our to-do list, Lady Nora. Look, certainly there's a lot of issues that we're all advocating on, and agreed, sometimes you do need that information in writing, so you've got something to refer back to, and you can say, yes, we had that conversation, and here's the proof. So, we'll certainly pick that up.
Definitely. I think we need to move on to our next theme, which is, oh my God,
service access and availability.
I'm going the right way, jolly good. Okay, so we all know that when you need a service, you need a service. It should be timely and managed so that you're getting what you need when you need it. But we've already talked about the longer than expected delays in assessment and the lack of ability for clinical professionals to override the outcome of the integrated assessment tool. And we also talked a little bit already today about the 60% interim packages that people are getting. So the concern about that is that you're not getting everything that you really need, but you're getting something. we know that you're unclear about your status in the queue if you decide not to take an interim package, that you don't know whether that means you're affected in future or not. And as I said before, we do think there should be a guaranteed maximum period of time that you're going to be on this lower level of package. We know that there's confusion and difficulties around accessing assistive technology and home modifications, and I think that's come out a number of times through the conversation today already. The thing too that is problematic that we don't have, the CHSP providers manage their own wait lists for service availability. And as we said, sometimes you think you've got a service on My Aged Care, and when you ring up, you find out they don't. And so that's really a difficult thing that we need to look at. And we've also talked today about regional and rural areas and the struggles that they're having, the costs that they're paying for transport, but also the struggles that they're having with workforce generally, and particularly specialist workforces. And we know too that if you're in a particular population, so if you're a person who's experiencing home loss or you're from a different cultural and linguistically diverse background, sometimes people are missing out on services because there's not someone right there to give you that support. So they're the issues that we're seeing. And as you can tell from the conversation we've been having today, there are a lot of things that we're talking about constantly and advocating on for government. We raise them. It doesn't mean we're going to get action. It doesn't stop us from trying, and we keep doing it. But sometimes we can get government change and sometimes we can't. But I think we're going to questions now, and our first question's from Martine, who wants more information about the assistive technology and home mods process, which we've also been talking about. So let's go through it because it might be helpful for everyone. So as you would probably know, there is a list, the Assistive Technology and Home Mods list, that outlines the types of assistive technology products and equipment that are low risk, require professional advice, or would benefit from prescription from health professionals. Remembering that this is a separate budget from your support at home budget, and you can't use your support at home budget for assistive technology and home mods. The funds that are in the assistive technology funds can only be spent on those and their associated costs. And that includes things like home modifications. You can use it, as we've said, we're a bit worried about what they're charging, but there are health professional prescriptions and other services that support you. There are some instances where you have to have a prescription. It's mandatory, and that's probably some of the things that have been raised already today. A prescription is required as evidence for some of those to change the assistive technology and home modifications funding tier, and that sort of ties into your support plan review. If you're trying to access assistive technology funding that's the high tier or over 15,000, you do need to have a prescription, and all home modifications do. So that's where it gets to the point where you do need a prescription through the system. So just to try and break it down so that you've got a sense of the funding approval sort of timeline, you can break it into stages. The first stage is when you apply for the assessment, and you'll do that through My Aged Care, or it might happen through a support plan review or reassessment. That's your first stage. So you're going to apply for that. I think we've talked about that. We probably don't need to cover that more on that. Then you're going to wait for an assessment, and we've touched on this too. That could be anything from 2 to 6 weeks before you're getting assessed. And the waiting times vary depending on local demand. In addition to the assessment, the process also includes prescriptions. So like we've said, qualified professionals. You may need to go through a quote and approval process. So once you've been approved, your provider has to submit a quote and clinical justification to the department for final approval. So that sort of adds another step. You might not need a quote for prescription to low risk or low cost items, but generally they're still looking for professional advice, usually required to ensure that the product meets your specific assessed needs. That's why the process is the way that it is. It's about 14 days to request for the request to be processed. And delays may occur if for some reason there's then a request for further clinical evidence. And then there's funding assignment. This is immediate if you've got restorative care or end of life pathways, but otherwise it's linked to classifications based on the assessed priority rating from 1 month through to the 11 month. So we know this is a complicated process, but hopefully those are the steps that are going through it, that you're going through. And I think we've already talked about how we would like to try and get some changes to that to improve it and to make it easier for you to get the piece that you need. Just the last thing on that is that the approved funding tier is the total amount of funding that the participant has that you have to spend on assistive technology or home mods, and that will include the prescription, and the funding period is usually 12 months. So hopefully that's just I hope that was relatively clear in terms of the steps in the process, but be assured we are having conversations about how we might be able to improve that. And Sam, I think you've got a question now.
I do. So from Ian in Victoria, and he asks, why when waiting for funds to be released for supported home level 8, do I get CHSP codes rather than the 60% in advance, or the minimum service offering as it's referred to? We can only assume that the CHSP codes would be to allow you to access basic entry-level services as you wait for your release of the package budget to come through. However, we also know that there's really long there's really long wait times for CHSP, and obviously we're also aware that in many areas CHSP is just not available because providers have their books full. So your question really highlights the impact of gaps of service access and availability. It can be the people with the highest level of need who are actually missing out the most in this. Absolutely. Okay, so let's go to open questions about service access and availability. What have we got in our chat, or raise your hand?
I don't know, while people are thinking about it, I know it's a long time and we're covering a lot of information in detail, and we've got one question that's come through.
That was similar to last time, yeah, Peggy's question about accessing the funding from ahead.
So look, some questions that have already come in, just to give you those. We've had Glenys from New South Wales who said that, like many people, she's experiencing the higher cost from third-party providers and support at home management, so therefore is getting less services. Further reforms going to happen about this and the ridiculous algorithm, to quote Glenys. And look, just to reiterate, third-party or subcontract provider costs shouldn't be higher. How third-party provider or subcontract costs are billed sometimes depends on your level of self-management and the provider that you choose. The administrative overheads are generally built into an hourly rate. And if self-managing, the provider can only charge an overhead to cover additional costs of up to 10% of the actual third-party service cost. And it's got to be transparently included so that you can see it. And obviously, as we've been saying, this is another thing that we want to try and work on to make sure that you're not losing funds in these kind of transactions and that you've got as much of your package available to spend on the things that you need.
Absolutely. We've had another couple of questions come through. So Indra is asking, is there a ranking system for service providers? Not as such, but there is a star rating system.
For residential care?
For residential care, so not for support at home, but you certainly can go to the star ratings website, and if you're looking particularly for residential aged care, and you can see and compare the star ratings that each of those providers
have. You can also look at information on the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission website. The last time I looked, it was not that easy to find, but hopefully it's improved a little bit. But you can actually have a look and see, it's not a ranking per se, but you can see how they've been assessed, and you can certainly see if there's been any issues with that provider, and if there are any sort of anything that's kind of being held against them at the time that they have to address. So, and that's across home care and residential care as well.
Yep. Next question is from Chandra. Has there been any discussions about advocating for an easier online platform to search for availability of providers by state? Currently, one has to call each provider in the area to check availability, and many do not have waiting lists. This means that you have to call a number of times throughout the year. And I hear your frustration, and I think Pat's raised this quite a number of times about there needs to be clear data on the website about if there's waiting lists or waiting times for
and this is also where we think if there was real-time data, that would be helpful. Like, so some systems, you know, like if you book an Uber or you book something else, you know instantly what's available and how long you have to wait. We don't know that from My Aged Care, and so that's something that we're also arguing, so that you don't have to waste your time ringing providers who are just going to tell you they don't have a service. So they are active conversations, and again, whether government can pick those up or not, I don't know, but certainly be sure we're raising those issues.
Silly. Sarah, I can see your hand is up.
Sorry, I just had a very quick question, just about that talking over. Yeah, I've got a bit of an unstable network, unfortunately. Things are a bit dodgy here. I keep dropping out. But can people register with, when they're doing, looking for their assessment, they go online, can they register with multiple providers in their region? So, they say they don't have capacity or whatever. Can they register? Quite often when you're shopping, it's like going out to a restaurant, you can pick a couple of places and hopefully somebody will get back to you. Are we seeing that happening at all?
I think what happens is you're more likely to get a code and then you do the shopping sub that. I know there is a back of house, and I'm not going to be able to explain it well today. There is a back of house option when your assessment first comes through. But unfortunately, the system does require you to find the provider with your code. So as we're saying, these are the sorts of things that we are trying to have improved for you.
And we have a sort of follow-up question from Marcia, who noted that the letters with codes are very confusing. And it's noted they are actually interim CHSP codes while they wait for their support at home allocation to come through. And should they really be relabeled? Well, I mean, the communication should be as clear as it possibly can. It should be plain English or the language that you understand. So agreed. The letters really do need bit of tightening up and a bit of clarification. So it's very easy for people to understand why they're receiving these codes and what those codes are for.
Yeah, something that we try and do all of the time is get them to look at the way those things are written. We've got one more question and we've only got a couple more minutes on this topic, so I think this will be the last one. Okay. There are not many service providers who accept self-management. Is there any solution to that? And I think that's one of the things that we're really going to push in this new price cap group, because we don't think it's right that providers can just say, no, they're not wanting you to self-manage. We think you should be able to self-manage. But at the moment, I think providers do have an ability to say they're not going to do that. They don't have to. So it's something, thanks for the question, it's something that we are going to take up because we know many more people want to be able to do that.
And apologies to Sharon, we're not going to get to your question, but please pop it in the chat so we don't lose it and we can respond to that. Okay, so now we're up to open topics. So this is your opportunity to ask any questions related to the themes that we've just spoken about or to anything else, and we will do our best to reply. And if we can't, we'll certainly take the question away and make sure that information gets provided. So try to be brief if you can when you're asking the question so that we can fit as many people as possible into this section. Okay, do we have, oh, yes we do. Sharon.
Hello, I'm Sharon from the Sunny Coast and I'm a care manager with a provider, and I have a lady that's a level 2, okay, she's exceeded her funds, she now has to have personal care 3 times a week. I've had her reassessed, she's exceeded her funds, her unspent funds, she's exceeding her level 2, 24/7 oxygen, and they've given her a medium wait time. Now, how do I, as a care partner, get that medium pushed to urgent? Because before, support at home, I could contact ACAT and talk to assessors, but now I can't. So how do I get that medium pushed to urgent? Because it is urgent.
I think you need to support the person to go back and try and push, and maybe that's the sort of thing OPAN you might also be able to give assistance on.
Yeah, but it's obviously linked to her priority rating, and there's 5 different points that they look at in that priority rating, and it is very difficult to get the amount of points you need to become urgent. So it's probably looking at that, talking to the assessor and going, is there somewhere where this person's needs have push them up that ranking in the priority rating, in particular if they've had hospitalizations, that can sort of give more points. So there's a point score to each of these questions. So that's probably the best thing is, as Pat said, go back to the assessment, see if you can get them to relook at that priority schedule. But we have found it is very difficult to move that priority rating.
And this is also why we're trying to make sure that in the discussions around the algorithm that there is the ability for clinical override, so that if there is something like this, the clinician can actually go in and say this person needs to be a higher level. So I think we need to make sure the systems doing what it needs to do and classifying people appropriately, but the absolute end result you want is for a clinician to be able to go, okay, this person actually does need a hire. I'm really conscious that today we're not able to answer a lot of questions about how you're going to be able to really change things. We can only say you can go back here or you can get support here. But these are the sorts of issues that we're taking up, and hopefully it'll be addressed over time, and that should be sooner rather than later. But we know it can take time to get these things to change.
Linda.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You mentioned right at the beginning when you were talking about budget, federal budget, about increased funds for respite. Now, do you have any details on that?
No, there wasn't a lot of detail. Sorry, there was kind of a line about it, but it's something that we can get more information about. We'll share it when we can.
Debbie.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question about the higher everyday living fee in residential care. My mother's recently moved into aged care, and like she moved in just after the changes were introduced. So she moved in a couple of weeks after the new changes came in, and the facility that she went into seemed to be quite confused about the new changes. And I'd just done your previous seminar in November, so I was full of all the how it had to be, and I kept telling them how it had to be, and they were like, "Oh no, that's not right, that's not right." And we were supposed to be able to have a bespoke higher everyday living fee, so you could just pick the bits you wanted, whereas it actually became evident that it was impossible to do that because there was no system they had in place to keep tabs on who was doing what. And if you're dealing with people who have got any sort of cognitive decline, then they're not going to keep a record themselves. So it was basically you had to be in for the full thing or not in at all. So we decided for the sake of an easy life that we had to go in for the full thing. But that's like $30 a day. And I found that ever since she's been in there, they've had multiple lockdowns where they've had infectious disease issues, and all the everyday living stuff's been cancelled. And you're paying $30 a day for nothing for all these weeks when there's nothing happening. And it's like $30 a day for the few things you get that are fun. And you want to have the fun things, but you don't want to be paying $30 a day for this thing that is not worth $30 a day.
No, absolutely. And look, I think that the department's actually having a webinar on higher everyday living fees, and I've got the date written down somewhere later, so I'll make sure we do that before we go. But we are hearing things like this that providers are still doing. Our understanding about the package, if the services are packaged, but you're not wanting to use all of them, it should still be a more reasonable price. So I don't know if that's how the $30 has been derived or not, but it's not supposed to cost you more than the parts you want. And maybe it is. That's something that could be looked at. But there is more work needing to be done. I mean, one of the good things about health coming in is you can't be forced to pay it. But as you said, you've made a decision that you think it's just going to be easier if you do, to make sure you get the fun bits. So again, this is something that needs some tweaking. We've heard some not very good stories about what providers are trying to charge for. Again, I would say in those instances, you can get OPAN to assist, but also make a complaint to the Quality and Safety Commission, because I think there was one the other week where they were trying to charge for volunteer musicians who were coming in.
Well, that in the Sydney Morning Herald, yes.
The polling. And we know that there are some interesting things going on about TVs, and our argument about TVs is you should be able to bring your own TV in. And you should be able to plug into the power supply and do that. And what we have to do is make sure that this stays contemporary. So look, there has been, and you might have seen, there were some surveys that were done a little while ago, which government's looking at. They surveyed older people and they surveyed providers. And, one of the things now will be to make sure that if there are tweaks that are made, that it's made in favour of it being easier and better value for older people, and to be able to just get what you want, not to have to take a whole lot of things at huge cost. So again,
because it does seem to be that some of the if you try and do the bespoke thing, the charge that they ascribe to individual components is so exorbitant. So it's not representative of what it actually costs.
But makes it more attractive for you to take the whole package.
Yes, because it's crazy prices if you try and say, I just want to do that one.
So please, we get it. And look, sorry, I did mention there is a webinar that the department's running if you want to see it specifically on higher everyday living fees, and that's on the 17th of June. But please be assured we'll note those issues and add them to the list of issues we have about higher everyday living fees and keep raising them.
Right. Linda, has your hand, I'm assuming it's a new raise?
Just quickly for clarification, is it true that someone who enters residential aged care on NDIS and is under 65, that they are taken off NDIS when they turn 65?
There is something around that, Linda, that we're exploring currently. So I don't know if I've got a good question for you, but I know that we're looking at the issues around under and over 65 right at the minute. So again, I'm going to have to say to you, we might need to do some more work before we can give you a really clear answer. Thank you.
But we can tell you that it isn't an automatic removal based on being 65 or not. So, but we will get back to you with some more details.
But it's really important to know that, no, it's not automatic. So I'm sorry I didn't say that up the top. It's not automatic and you can challenge that.
Jacinta from Tasmania asks, how do the reforms affect the interface between aged care and veterans home care? Good question. Not something I've looked at in depth. Do you?
The aged care reforms don't remove access to veterans home care or DVA support. So many veterans should just continue to receive services through both systems, depending on their eligibility and needs. One of the ongoing challenges we see is making sure that we know which system, or we understand which system is responsible for funding particular supports. Because aged care, DVA and health can overlap. The government's indicated to us that it's continuing to do some work on alignment and transition arrangements between support at home and veterans to try and reduce duplication and confusion. So the best thing you can probably do is speak to both My Aged Care and DVA to understand how the different programs interact in your individual circumstances.
So we have another question in the chat, and that's from Marilyn from New South Wales, and someone from the ACT has also asked a very similar question. Marilyn has said, I need lymphedema garments, which are no longer covered by my package. They are $1,635 per pair, and I need 2 pairs minimum every 6 months. So Support at Home operates under a defined service list and funding rules, and some providers are taking a narrower interpretation of what can be purchased, particularly for medical type consumables or equipment such as lymphedema garments. While some people may previously have accessed this through home care packages, providers may now be assessing whether the item fits within the approved Support at Home categories or whether another part of the health system is considered responsible. This is really absolutely an area where many participants are seeking greater clarity and consistency. We also know it varies significantly from state to state, depending on the different subsidy schemes that are available in those states. So absolutely hear what you're saying. That's a huge amount of money to have to come up with each year potentially. But yeah, that depending on your state or territory, there may be a local scheme that you can access that could support you with that. Okay, we've got another question online. Is there a process to complain report services that are poorly performing? E.g., they change times to clean the garden or don't come or do a very poor job. Quality and Safety Commission, absolutely. Make a complaint to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission and let them know, note down all the issues that you're having and report it directly to them.
And it's important. One of the things that we did advocate for through the reforms was that the Complaints Commissioner should be an independent statutory position. So that has happened while they're still sitting within the Quality and Safety Commission sort of framework. There is now an independent commissioner, and I've seen some comments in the chat going through today while we were talking about how people are perhaps concerned that the Quality and Safety Commission is more focused on providers. That was one of the reasons we wanted the Complaints Commissioner to be independent, so that it wasn't all tied up in the one in the one way that it was happening, which we did start to see as a bit of a conflict of interest. I've got to accredit these services and then I'm dealing with complaints against them. So Treasure Jennings is the new Complaints Commissioner. She's not so new now, but she did come in last year, and they are looking at their processes and trying to make it easier for people, trying to give you more information about how long the complaints process will take and when you might expect to hear. They are absolutely your point of contact to make any complaints about services.
Okay. Lady Nora, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I do. That was my question about the Quality Care and Safety Commission, because they don't provide quality care and safety to us, they provide it to the provider. So that is serious. So do you think that you can now go back to them and they're going to be looking after us and not the providers? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we're saying that what we advocated for was an independent statutory position to do complaints. So the person who's managing the complaints process for you and from you is not also the person who's responsible for accrediting the services. So we would hope that makes it a better process for you, and that they're more looking at it from your point of view, not just the provider's point of view. So that's we still need to hear from you about whether or not that's having that effect, but that was precisely why we said it should be an independent statutory position, not involved in accrediting services. So hopefully, Lady Nora, that will help. We talked about the need to have multiple providers, but this question is saying that we understand the Commission is looking at how they could create a consistent list of requirements for associate providers. Onboarding, so it's the same for all providers, but that's not yet available. Yes, that would be true. And I think there'll be a range of things that need to happen if we're going to go to that multiple providers approach, so that people can feel comfortable and assured that they're getting quality services. But the absolute focus on that is making sure that you can go directly and not have to pay unnecessary fees on top, and that if you're self-managing, you've got more choice and you're not stuck with having to go through one provider all the time.
Marie, I could see you hunting for the mute button there. Are you able to join us? Yes, great.
Hey, mine's only a really minute question. A few years back, I had a knee operation and I was on the package. So I'm just wondering, does my aged care number still stay the same? And so if I ever needed to go and use aged care again, would that be the number I would use?
I believe so.
I believe so, yes.
Oh,
should
cool.
still work.
Yeah.
It's only a minute question, but it's been on my mind, because I'm 70, but I hate to be horrible to people, but I've done okay, and I'm not very sick at the moment.
No, look, it's actually it's an important question. So your client number will still be the same, but if you did have referral codes, they might have expired, and you would probably get new ones, but they should be able to find you in the system if you need support.
Great. Petra. Yep, you're with us.
Petra, sorry, you came quite loudly. You gave me a fright.
Okay, yeah, in regards to the Aged Care Quality Complaints Commissioner, I recently lodged a complaint and it took a while to be addressed. And I think I made a comment with Liz from the Aged Care Commissioner. Like she did. Anyway, because I made a comment there, like I had a answer the next day from one of the aged care commissioners, and so he took all my details and like what I put in writing, and then he was calling me back and was very compassionate about my concerns. But and he said it would take about 2 weeks and he would get back to me. And when he got back to me, he took sides with the provider and their lies. And I, in the meantime, received from 5 high-up senior managers apologies in writing and verbally that they were not transparent, they were not answering my questions, there was no communication, and the whole issue was delayed. So, and Well, I could have put a review, but I sent an email to the Quality Comments Commissioner and also addressed it to the 5 senior managers from my provider that like it was absolutely lies what was presented to them. And so my case through the managers has been settled, but I don't think like it was not a good experience with the aged care complaints commissioner. And 3 years ago, I had the same issue, and I asked for a review, and then I didn't get ahead, and then I lodged a complaint with the ombudsman. There was no response at all. After a few months, they asked me, has your situation changed? And I said, no. And that was the end of it.
Well, I'm sorry that you haven't had a good experience, and thank you so much for sharing the experience that you had. These are the things we sort of need to hear so that we can continue to work through. That's not how we would have thought that it might sort of go, but thank you for sharing your experience, and we'll be looking for that.
And certainly we can raise those concerns as well. Mary Dunlop.
Sorry. With the Quality and the Safety and Quality Commission and everybody else that we've been directed to with regard a complaint, the last thing we heard was the lady who I put the complaint in on her behalf apparently spoke to a person who said, look, there's really nothing we can do about this, and she agreed. Now, she says emphatically that did not happen. No way, not at all. And I can believe that because we're talking about $19,000 going missing from her funds from provider A to provider B. And we got more help out of the aged care lady at Bustleton who looked at the name of the firm that she was with, the first one, who actually were under 3 different names, none of which were registered with Services Australia. So it's clear to me $19,000 has taken a walk and nobody gives a continental. And this lady now has no $19,000 in her account.
Well, that sounds like a really dreadful outcome. It's really hard for us to comment on specific cases, but again, thank you for sharing that. So that's not been resolved then, it's just been sort of left. So thank you for sharing that. It's the sort of thing that we can ask questions about.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Pat said, that disappointing that these things have happened, but we'll continue to advocate to improve complaint systems and other systems as well. Isabel.
Hi there. Sorry, I just want to clarify because I'm not 100% sure. So can you hear me first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, great. So is it possible to receive both aged care and NDIS services concurrently if you are over 65 and using different supports from each system, like, a social support program from aged care and then you've got everything else from NDIS? Is that possible, like a CHSP?
I see that there's been a lot of conversation in the chat about that, so I don't want to weigh in, but I think that the team have been answering questions, and what we might need to do is make sure that when the information comes around, we give you a clear steer on that. Sorry, I've seen a lot of exchanges and I can't quite keep up exactly with what's been said there. So if you can bear with us, we might try and send something around that's really clear on that, because it looks like there's been lots of people saying different things, and so we might need to try and get a clear line for you.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. Are there any plans to make the My Aged Care review and appeals process easier to access? People only have 28 days to request a review, and it needs to be written by the person themselves and sent by mail with no online option, which is a barrier for those who are vulnerable, have cognitive issues, or have a language barrier. That's from Daniel. One hopes so. So as I said, certainly with the review process for assessments and other things, it was that 28 days. It did have to be written But now they are introducing an online option to do that. I don't know when that's coming in, but that's certainly going to be made available. So they're making steps towards making the system simpler, and we'll continue to push to make sure those changes keep happening.
And we'll keep, yeah, as Sam's saying, we'll keep pushing for them.
Yeah. Lady Nora.
Hi. I had a second question, but you muted me. It's just quickly, are you able to explain energy when you've got solar rebates, right? You've got your solar panels, feed-in tariff and all of that, and you're getting credit in your electricity account. Doesn't that accumulate if you haven't used that credit from the previous quarter, and it's still, in my eyes, it's still sitting there because you haven't touched it, like you haven't transferred it anywhere, and that's still sitting there. Then the next quarter comes in, then you've got another credit. Doesn't that accumulate and add together?
So, Lady Nora, can we take that on notice, please? Because I think I need to check a few things. We should be able to give you some answers on that, but off the top of my head this afternoon, at nearly the end of the webinar, I probably can't. But is that okay? Can we take that offline and let you know about that?
Okay, I'm just going to go
yes,
back.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
I'm just going to go back and see if Linda's managed to get herself on. I'm conscious that we're very close to time. No. Okay, Linda, look, sorry that we couldn't get to your question. Obviously, good old internet is playing up. So if you could send those questions in, we'd really appreciate that. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you very much to everyone who joined us, and especially to those of you that asked questions and submitted questions prior to the webinar and submitted questions through the chat. As we noted, there's obviously more questions than we could actually cover in the time available, but we'll review everything submitted and use those issues to help shape our next webinar on the 30th of June. So there are also other events coming up that may be of interest. As Pat said, on the 17th of June, the department will run a webinar explaining the residential care service list and the new high arrangements. And Pat, I'll hand back to you to close us out.
Well, thank you. Thanks to all of you for sticking with us for the couple of hours, for asking some excellent questions, some of which we could answer, some of which we might need to give you some more info on. But nevertheless, I hope you still found it an informative and interesting couple of hours. We'll look forward to seeing you again on the 30th. I do want to thank all of the team and Sam in particular for soldiering on. Also to the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing, who have actually are supporting us to do this. And hopefully we'll see many of you again on the 30th. We'll try and pick different topics that have been coming up. We may have answers to some of the questions that we couldn't necessarily answer today. But thank you so much for your time. You will get a copy of the presentation and the webinar recording. If you've subscribed to our newsletter, which is really easy to do and it's free of charge, we'll also send you that policy briefing on the budget that we talked to you about. But right now, I think we'll just say thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll look forward to seeing some of you again on the 30th of June. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Pat. Bye, everybody.